your right hand, sir. State your name.
David Hoover.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Seek it.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
and if you would state your name for the record, please.
David Hoover, David Hoover.
Thank you. And where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation at the Nashville Crime Laboratory in the latent fingerprint or latent print unit.
And what is your title or position there?
I'm a special agent forensic scientist.
All right. And Agent Hoover, if you would, kind of give the jury a brief overview of what your duties are there within the latent print division.
My duties typically include processing evidence for fingerprints, any developed fingerprints or any developed prints that I find on the evidence I photograph or in some way capture them, then compare them and make identifications to individuals if that's possible. Also enter stuff into the APHIS database, search through the database for individuals as well. I also write my reports and testify in courts of law.
You mentioned the APHIS database. Could you explain what that is?
The APHIS database is essentially a database of fingerprint cards that we have on file at the TBI, and then we're able to search unknown fingerprints against that database to see if we can find an individual who may have left that print.
And how long have you been doing this there at the TBI?
I started in March of 2000, so about almost 25 years.
If you would, tell us a little bit about your educational background that allows you to perform those duties there at the TBI.
My background includes a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from David Lipscomb University with a minor in chemistry. Then at the TBI itself, I underwent a 2-year training period under court-qualified fingerprint examiners with over 100 years of experience. Since then, I've also had training from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the Mississippi State Crime Laboratory, Arizona State Crime Laboratory, I believe, other agencies that have produced classes, as well as gone to conventions and things that also had classes throughout those 25 years.
All right. How many examinations would you say that you've performed over your almost 25 years there at the lab?
At this point, I would think it was in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands.
Okay. Do you hold any certifications in the field?
I do. I'm a certified latent print examiner with the International Association for Identification.
And what type of technical equipment do you have there that you use at the lab?
We typically use a lot of the same things you actually see on TV. A lot of times you will see the dust fingerprint on a car or window or something, and they'll dust it and lift it. We actually still do that. We also use fluorescent dyes, which fluoresce at different wavelengths. So we have light sources that do different wavelengths as well. We now also have a system that we've had actually for quite a while. It's called RUVIS, which is Reflective Ultraviolet Light Imaging System, and they've learned that under certain wavelength of light, in this situation 254 nanometer light, it will the oils and the sweat of the fingerprints will reflect, and you can actually capture them photographically with that system.
All right. And is this pretty standard equipment that's used across the country in various labs?
Pretty much, yes, I believe so.
Agent Hoover, have you been qualified to testify as an expert witness in the criminal courts here in Tennessee?
Yes, I have.
And after having been qualified as an expert, have you then gone on to give expert testimony?
Yes, I have.
And so then you've been qualified as an expert in the field of latent print identification, is that correct?
Yes, in both state and federal courthouses.
All right. Judge, at this time we would offer Agent Hoover as an expert in the field of latent print identification.
He's an expert. All right. He'd be cleared to be an expert in the field of latent print or fingerprint identification.
Agent Hoover, if you would, just tell us a little bit about what latent prints are.
A latent fingerprint is essentially a reproduction of the ridges of your fingers or palms, and it can also include your feet. This is called friction ridge skin. It helps you hold on to things. So a latent print is essentially a reproduction of those ridges on a surface after you've touched them. Essentially, you've touched something, you've left sweat or oil in that reproduction of your ridges behind on that surface.
Okay. And as a latent print examiner, when you look at an object or you're looking for prints, what exactly is it that you're looking for?
I am looking for the ridge formations that we have in our fingerprints. Predominantly, we'll look for what is called level 1 detail first, which is the ridge flow and the pattern types within the fingerprint. Sometimes we don't have the pattern types and we can only look for the ridge flow itself. We're also looking for what we call level 2 detail, which is bifurcations, ridge endings, dots. These are the types of things that happen within the ridge flow itself. So a ridge is flowing along and then it suddenly stops and the two ridges on either side continues to go. That's an ending ridge. A bifurcation is essentially like a fork in a road. So you have the same thing except for that ending ridge touches one or the other side of that, those other two ridges, forming essentially a fork in the ridge flow itself. A dot is essentially what it describes. It's defined. It's just simply a small area that's just a ridge, and it's just a small dot that shows up.
All right. Are latent prints more than just what we talk about as being fingerprints?
Yes.
Okay. What all is?
There can be fingerprints, there can be palm impressions. Your joints of the fingers also have the same type of detail that we can use to identify people. And like I said a little earlier, your feet even has the same thing where you can actually develop feet footprints and then compare them to individuals, their footprints, and see if it's the same individual or not. It's rare, but it can be used for identification purposes.
Okay. If you would, talk for a second about how a latent print is created or left on a surface.
Like I said, when you touch something, you can leave behind that sweat and oil on that surface, and it can remain there, and then I can process it and develop it to be able to actually see it and capture it.
Okay. Do certain things affect whether or not you're able to develop a latent print on a surface or an object?
Yes. Some surfaces are not very good at retaining a latent print. Rough surfaces typically are not something that's very good in retaining a usable latent print, because as you touch a rough surface, that rough surface is going to break up that ridge flow. What you're touching, what you're using to actually leave behind, like I said, is sweat and oils, which typically also have a lot of water to them as well. So you're talking about a liquid medium, and if you're touching something that's very bumped and bubbled up, then some of that medium is going to be lost in the valleys and crevices of the rough surface. Some of it's going to be left on top. So it's going to be very broken up, and you're not going to be able to see or use it to actually identify somebody. Because what we're looking for is enough information and enough clear information to be able to say this latent print was left by this person's finger or palm or footprint.
Okay. And does whether or not a surface is clean or dirty, does that affect?
That can also affect it, yes.
Okay. Now, you work at the lab in Nashville, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have a process as far as processing evidence that comes into the lab there in Nashville?
Yes, we do.
If you would explain to the jury how that works.
So an agency will bring in a piece of evidence. It will go through our evidence receiving section, in which case that piece of evidence is given a specific lab number and an evidence number. If that lab number is already created, then that's another lab number, or excuse me, another evidence number. As it goes through, it's then the case is assigned to an individual. In this case, I would receive the case. In this situation, I would receive the case. And then I would go pick up that evidence from evidence receiving to then do my testing.
All right. And prior to testing any items, do you make sure that they have been secured and not tampered with in any way?
The evidence receiving unit is involved in that, and they have a vault in which it is stored in, and that only they have the opportunity to get to. Once I get the evidence, I make sure that the evidence is in a sealed condition in some way, and then I go from there and then open it, process it from there.
All right. If we could at this time, I'd like to hand Agent Hoover exhibit number 196, trash can.
So this is the trash can that I received. It has our laboratory number, it has our exhibit number as well as my initials. This is the sticker that was on the side of the trash can. It also contains the exhibit number and my initials. And these are pieces of the rim of the trash can that I removed to be able to process better.
Okay. So at the time that you received the trash can there at the lab, the pieces that you just held up, they were
actually
It was a full-
attached. Yes, it was a full trash can with those pieces of the rim attached to it.
Okay, you removed them, they were not broken or anything like that, is that
No,
correct?
they were not.
And you mentioned you held up a sticker, is that, is that like a sticker that would come from the manufacturer?
Yes,
That was on there?
yes, it was on the side of the trash can. It's a Sterilite sticker, manufacturer of the trash can.
Okay, and you removed that as well?
I did.
Okay. All right, Agent Hoover, did you attempt to develop any latent prints off of that particular item, the trash can?
I did.
And if you would kind of walk us through what your approach to analyzing that piece of evidence was?
May I refer to my notes, Your Honor? Is that all right?
Yes.
Thank you. On that trash can, I did pretty much a full process of just about everything that we can do at the laboratory, or that we normally do for fingerprints at the laboratory, including super glue, dust, the Ruva system that I mentioned, the ALS, the fluorescent dyes that I mentioned as well. The rim, especially the body itself, no, it looks like I did everything on even the body itself as well.
Okay. And what were you able to determine, or what were you able to find as far as the prints were concerned?
On the sticker, I found a palm print, and up underneath the rim, which is the reason why I removed the rim, I found the very far tip of a fingerprint. And when I mean a far tip of the fingerprint, I'm talking about the areas up here at the very tip top of your print, right as it goes into the nail.
Okay. Talk about the palm print that you found for a second.
The palm print that I found was very small. In fact, it was probably about my size of my palm. The whole palm would have fit in about that much of the palm print. So I'm confident that it's probably a child's print. Some women, some people do have smaller hands, and so I couldn't totally discount comparing it to some other people. But it was a very small print.
Certainly didn't, would you say it was not the size of a normal man's hand?
Objection to leave. Sustained.
Well,
I'm sorry.
okay. Oh. So, you've already stated what you thought as far as that size was concerned. And so you excluded Megan Boswell as being the
I
contributor.
did compare it to
correct?
Megan Boswell, and I was able to exclude it from her.
Okay. And you mentioned the fingerprint, and again, where did you locate that?
Up underneath the rim, I believe was on the right side.
All right. And were you able to make any conclusions as far as that fingerprint was concerned?
I was.
And what did you conclude as far as that was concerned?
Well, eventually I was.
Okay. But, well, on the date that your initial examination was done and the report
My
was
initial-
issued on April the 2nd of 2020.
That was inconclusive to her because, in general, when you do a fingerprint card, if you look at the finger when you touch it, if you're doing a fingerprint card and you're rolling the person's finger, this part of the finger does not touch. So you don't really get a good recording of that tip area. That happens actually quite often.
All right. Agent Hoover, I'm going to hand you a document and ask you if you recognize that.
Thank you. Yes, it did.
And what is that?
It appears to be a copy of my report from April 2nd of 2020.
And is that a true and accurate copy of your report?
Yes, sir.
Judge will move to make that exhibit
253.
253.
Full exhibit 253.
Agent Hoover, you mentioned that you did not have good rolled prints of Megan Boswell. Is that correct?
I would say I did not have complete prints,
Okay.
at
Did
least in
you-
that tip area. Sorry.
Sorry. Did you then attempt to, or speak with law enforcement in an attempt to get better prints of Miss Boswell done?
I did.
Okay. And did they comply with your request? Did you receive additional prints from them?
I did. They complied.
Okay. And were you able to do any additional comparisons based upon that next set of prints that they sent you?
Unfortunately, I was not able to.
Okay. And why was that?
The prints that I was sent still were not of a good enough quality to actually compare to.
And did you, Agent Hoover, did you prepare a finding in that regards? In the
I
official
did.
report? I'm going to hand you a document and ask you if you recognize that.
Yes, sir, I do.
And what is it?
That is a copy of my report from July the 31st of 2020.
All right. Reflecting that again, you still were not able to perform any.
My result was inconclusive again.
Okay. And is that a true and accurate copy?
It appears to be, yes.
Judge, I move to make that exhibit 254.
Yes. Yes, 254. Full exhibit.
And so, Agent Hoover, did you then again speak with law enforcement?
Yes, it did.
And what was the nature of your conversation at that point?
That I still needed better prints, especially those around the tip area.
All right. And did they try yet again to get you a good copy of prints from Miss Boswell?
Yes, they did.
All right. Did they use a different technique this time?
Slightly different.
Okay. If you would, tell the jury what type of technique they used.
They tried to use what is called hinge lifters. These are a product that some forensic warehouses produce, and it essentially is a small plastic, can be a square, can be a rectangle piece with tape over it, so that what happens is when you lift the tape, you're able to then lift it or put the tape over the print and then lift it, and it has its own backing already. And they attempted to do that and use, again, the same type of material to try to lift that print, or to try to lift that area of her finger, and send it to me.
All right. And any success this time on being able to do a comparison?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. And did you, again, prepare a report?
Yes, I did.
And what is it?
It appears to be a copy of my report dated July the 8th of 2021.
Is that a true and accurate copy of your report?
Appears to be.
Judge, that would move to make that exhibit 256.
Okay. Full exhibit 256.
Agent Hoover, I'm going to ask that you be handed exhibits 201 and 203.
Put everything back in that bag.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Do you recognize those items?
I do.
And how is it that you recognize them?
Again, I have our laboratory number, exhibit number, and my initials on the bag, as well as on the box itself.
Okay. And these items, were they the foil sheeting that you were requested to develop latent prints from?
Yes.
Okay. And did you in fact perform an examination on those items?
I did.
Okay. What was your findings initially?
My initial findings
Yes.
from the May the 10th,
Yes,
21
sir.
report,
Yes, sir.
that I did not find any fingerprints of identifiable value on the foil.
Talk about the challenges of trying to develop prints off of that foil.
That foil was very wrinkled, for one thing, which is also very detrimental to fingerprint reproduction. The ridges of the wrinkling will break up the fingerprint. Secondly, there was either trash or decomposition that was all over much of the foil. All of that would also affect the ability for the fingerprints to remain or to develop on the foil itself.
All right. And did you prepare a report of your initial findings
I
with
did.
regards to foil? I'm going to hand you a document and ask if you can identify it.
Yes, I recognize it.
And what is it?
It appears to be a copy of my report dated May the 10th, 2021.
All right. Is that a true and accurate copy of your report?
Appears to be, yes.
Judge, I'd move to make that exhibit number 257.
Full exhibit 257.
Now, Agent Hoover, in regards to the foil, were you later contacted by scientists within the lab about performing additional testing on the foil?
Yes, it was.
And did you in fact receive that foil back in the lab?
Yes, it originally went back to the Knoxville laboratory, and then it came back to us in the Nashville laboratory.
Okay. And do you remember why that was?
Yes, part of the original packaging was a large box, and then inside that box was these other pieces as well. And this box had markings on it that looked like it was only for forensic biology. And so I ignored that box and focused on the other pieces of aluminum foil because that's what I was understanding was to be working, to be processing. That was the actual piece of evidence. I did not know that the forensic biologist had separated one piece out because she actually saw ridge detail that would be considered fingerprints. And so she actually separated that piece out and sent it separate so that nothing got destroyed or damaged. And it was my mistake that I did not recognize that that box was actually also part of the full exhibit.
Okay. And when you say the box, you're talking, it's actually in a separate, it's Exhibit 203, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so you had not performed testing on that piece initially? Is that
No, I
right?
did not.
Okay. After it was received back in the lab by you, did you perform testing on it?
Yes, it did.
And were you able to develop any sort of latent print profiles as a result?
I developed a couple of prints on it. One print was not identifiable, meaning it did not have enough clarity or detail to be able to use to identify to an individual. One print was identifiable, and that print I identified. You're right.
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
My findings on that one was that it did identify to Megan Boswell's left middle finger.
So you had one print that there was no identification, you can't make any idea
It wasn't
of
useful for it, no.
Okay, and the only other one was identified to Megan Boswell, is that
That's correct.
And did you prepare a report of your findings in regards to that piece of foil?
I did.
Agent Hoover, I'm going to hand you a report or document and ask you if you can identify that.
Yes, I recognize it.
And what is it?
It's another copy of my report from May the 6th, 2022.
And is that a true and accurate copy of your report?
Yes, it appears to be.
Judge, we would move to make that exhibit number 258.
Full exhibit 258.
And Agent Hoover, you also received several other items that you were asked to work, and those included a candy wrapper and a bed sheet. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Were you able to make any identifications or get any results from those items?
The candy wrapper, I was not. It didn't have any fingerprint detail whatsoever, didn't have any ridges whatsoever. The bed sheet I did not examine as a latent fingerprint expert or individual because the bed sheet would not be something we would typically look for fingerprints on. It's a cloth folded up item that we wouldn't actually think of a fingerprint developing on.
And finally, if we could hand you Exhibit 198. Plastic. You recognize that item?
I do.
And how is it that you recognize it?
Again, this one happens to be a sticker, but we have our laboratory number as well as the exhibit number and my initials.
And that item is a black, if you could remove it, is that a black plastic bag?
Yes, it is.
All right. And Did you perform print analysis on the bag?
Yes, I did.
All right. And if you would, tell us what you were able to find in regards to the bag.
On 17A, I originally developed 2 identifiable latent fingerprints and 1 identifiable impression. And what I mean by an impression is I can't determine if it's a finger, a palm, a joint. I don't know its specific orientation or its specific where it specifically came from, whether it was one of those types of anatomical positions.
Okay. And did you make any determinations as far as comparison was concerned on the 2 identifiable latent fingerprints?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what were you able to, what were your findings in that regard?
I identified 1 to the right middle finger of Megan Boswell and 1 to the right ring finger of Megan Boswell.
And what about the latent impression?
At that time, I reported that it was inconclusive with Megan Boswell.
And did you prepare a report of your findings
I did.
on that date? I'm going to hand you another document, Agent Hoover, and ask if you can identify that.
Yes, I did.
And what is that?
It's a copy of my report from February 27th of '22.
And is that a true and accurate copy
Yes,
of your report?
it appears to be.
Judge, we move to make that exhibit number 259, I believe.
Full exhibit 259.
Agent Hoover, did you develop any other prints or any other, make any other findings in regards to evidence that was sent to you on this particular case?
The only other thing was that latent impression I eventually determined was insufficient quality for identification purposes due to its distortion, and some of the other detail and stuff was not as clear as I originally thought.
Okay. And that was from the black
Plastic
bag.
trash bag.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
And did you make a report of that particular finding as well?
I did.
Okay. And was that on your report issued on May the 6th of 2022?
That's correct.
Agent Hoover, I'm going to hand you a document in that regard.
Thank you.
Did you already have that one? Did I?
Looks to me like, look at 258. I wrote down it was May 6, 2022.
If I could. I mean, that may be. Is that the same one? That may be the same one, Judge. which, does he have the one I just handed him?
I do.
Yes. That's the same. Okay. That's the same. Agent Hoover, of all the exhibits that you tested in this particular case, were there any prints that you could have possibly identified, any other prints that you were able to develop?
The only one remaining is the small palm print from the trash can sticker.
That you believe is from a child, is that right?
It,
That's what he said.
It's the same.
So, again, Agent Hoover, the only print that you developed that you were not able to identify was the small print from the side of the trash can, is that correct?
on the sticker, correct.
And based on your training and experience, did you have an opinion as to whether that was from an adult or a child?
My opinion would be that it would be from a child. However, I can't discount a small individual. But I do not believe it's from a normal-sized adult.
All right. Thank you, Agent Hoover. If you would answer any questions.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take about 15-minute break.
Everyone stand, please.
During the break, please do not. There are two resources that I use when in addition to the Burns test. There's a lesser included offense list on the AOC website.
I had went by Judge Tipton's outline, and it does go back a ways, but I don't think it's been overturned at least.
I'll look at those.
And as it relates to child abuse and child neglect, they're not necessarily lessors under the Burns test. They are lessors by statute, and I cited the subsection of the statute that makes them lessors. We need to approach, Judge, if we could.
I mean, I don't know if it matters, I don't know what you're using it for exactly.
All right, is the state ready to proceed?
State's ready, yes, Judge. Sorry.
State's ready to proceed?
Yes, sir.
We agree.
Everyone stand, please.
may be seated. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hoover. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. My name's Gene Scott.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I want to talk to you about that palm print
Okay.
that was discussed earlier. You did not include in your report, exhibit number 253, that was a small palm print. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But what you're describing to me sounds as though that could have been a child's palm print, could have even been Evelyn's palm print.
It's very possible.
Were you able to check against her palm print or not?
Against Evelyn's?
Yes.
No, I actually did request to see if her body was still at the medical examiner's office, and if so, if they could send me the fingerprint cards, but I never received them, so I'm assuming the child was already gone.
Okay. And as it relates to, in your report, it appears to me that you also wanted to check it against Ethan Perry and Eric Smith.
No, I did not.
You did not. Would you like to see your, but you said it will be compared with.
I said it would be compared with once I would receive known finger impressions or known palm impressions of those two individuals, yes.
So was it compared?
No, it was not.
Okay. So I guess you're saying it's probably Evelyn, but you're still going to compare it against these men,
If they sent it in, I would, yes.
just to rule it out.
Correct.
Okay. And why do you say it could be Evelyn? Is it because when somebody, obviously your fingerprints are probably all over everything in your house, is that a fair statement?
It can be, yes. I mean, some surfaces, again, are better than others.
Sure. Bed sheets don't take fingerprints as well as something shiny generally.
Not unless it's a situation in which, like, those fingerprints were in some form of material, paint, blood, something like that.
Right. So it wouldn't be uncommon, in your opinion, for someone's fingerprints to be on items in their home.
No, that's common.
As it relates to the aluminum foil and the one fingerprint you find of Megan's, you can't say when that print was put there, can you?
No, I cannot.
It's possible it was on the aluminum foil before the foil was placed on the child.
I have no knowledge of that one way or the other.
It would be possible.
That's a possibility.
And again, you have no knowledge one way or the other if the print was, when the print was made there.
No, that's correct.
How long would the print stay there?
That's something you really can't determine, depending upon the situation. If the print was protected and like in a closed off space inside of a box, like a keepsake box or something like that, it may last for quite a while. In fact, I had one that they know of. It was a ex-wife's fingerprint in a case, and it was on a box that hadn't been touched for 5 years, but it was in a closet inside a box. It was perfectly protected. Once you get into places where you have water, rain, heat, cold, different things affecting the actual piece of evidence, you're not going to have typically a longer lifespan of that fingerprint.
Okay, what do you describe as a longer lifespan?
If I left a fingerprint here and then immediately did that, I could wipe it away right there and it would be gone. If I had something like on a beer can on the side of the road in the summertime, it may bake it off fairly quickly. If it's not raining or anything, but it's cooler, it may last a little longer. That's what I'm saying. There's no real evidence that shows us how long one will stay on a surface of something in a specific amount of time.
It sounds to me like you're saying cool and dry preserves it better than hot and wet.
Yes. Typically.
Give me just a second. Let me ask you about latex gloves. Latex gloves, will they prevent the leaving of fingerprints?
They can, yes.
So is that something that someone would do to not contaminate evidence or not leave their prints on something?
That's correct, yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Nothing further, Judge.
Is he free to go?
He is for the state.
Is he free to go?
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Released from your subpoena.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Dr. Matrina Schmidt.